Well, good morning. We're a little thin in the committee right this minute. I know Senator Perkins Polk is caught in a traffic jam, but we're going to get started and see if we can do our best to stay on time, and hopefully they'll be able to join us soon. Senator Altschul is coming in now. Awesome. Good morning.
Good morning.
So on your desk, you're going to find several amendments. And another one we've got now. All right. I'm going to have a start with the non-OPLC, well, the not start on the big ones, since we'll try and give Senator Perkins Polk a chance to get here on, especially on the one for 409, since some of the changes are hers. I'll give you just a minute to get settled in.
Where are we starting? Which one?
We'll start with 337.
337. Bless you.
So the committee asked me to take this back and make a change to, actually, you know what? I need a motion to go into executive session.
I move to go into executive session.
Do I have a
I'll
second?
second.
I'll move and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Sorry about that. I almost forgot my process there.
That's okay.
Now we'll start with 337. This is the bill, the amendment that I brought in last week. And the committee had asked that I make a change to it. I was hoping that Doug would be over here, Doug Osahalt, but I do have his notes, so I'll try and explain it all. So I made a change to line 25, because the concern was they had items shall undergo legal review and be made into the public as soon as possible, and I changed it to available to the public within 7 calendar days, because that was what the committee had requested that we changed to. So that would take care of the last minute meeting add-ons. You remember they were able to, the chair was able to add on items to the agenda last minute. And so this will cover that one. What it doesn't cover is the information from the emergency hearings. Because if you read in, starting on line 26, it says this section shall not apply to emergency meetings conducted pursuant to RSA 91A2. So actually Doug is here. Would you mind coming up, Doug? I have your email and was going to explain it, but you'll do a better job than I will.
Good morning, Douglas Osterhout, General Counsel for OPLC. So I just stepped in the room, but it sounds like the question is around posting materials for those sort of emergency situations.
Yeah, so this is what I was working with you yesterday. I explained to the committee and I put the changes in that we talked about so that it was listed as 7 days for the last minute additions to the agenda, but the
Right.
emergency hearings was what my concern was.
Yeah, so I'm doing this from memory, but there's a section under 310.9
I have
and
your
there's
email if you'd
a
like.
section
That
under
might help.
310.10. That's the same information.
Okay.
That'll be more precise, but those both have information about, I think 9 relates to investigative materials that are confidential until there's a hearing and that is used in a hearing, then it's made public. And then I think 10 is just kind of treats all hearings as.
So 9 is allegations of mixed conduct, 10 is
Okay.
disciplinary action.
Yep, so I'm getting it right, look at me go. And then so section 10 is that all of those disciplinary hearings are public. So the materials used in those hearings, the filings, the evidence, those things are made public at the time of the hearing and subsequently. So they are public documents, they are subject to 91A, and all of that is made available. We post the discipline on the website already as well.
So I hope that satisfies the committee's request to make sure that things were available to the public. So again, the change we've made is on line 25, changing it from as soon as possible to 7 calendar days, so there is a defined time there. And then the emergency meeting portion would be addressed as Mr. Osahalt has explained.
It looks like you changed out, took out from the amendment 1686 that was provided last week.
I don't know if I have last week's amendment with me. I'm not certain I have that.
Yeah, I remember it here.
I may have it. That's last week's? Yep, okay.
Oh, no, I see, it's, everything's shifted down. Never
Yeah.
mind, I'm looking at the side by
Oh, line
sides.
by line, yeah.
It's there's a shift down, never mind, got it. I'm trying to go line by line and I'm realizing
I-
it's not the same setup.
Is everybody satisfied with the change in this one?
Yes.
And just 2 minutes here.
Mr. Chair, I'm gonna go ahead and move, to pass on amendment 1898S.
I'll second it.
All right, I think we have to move the bill first.
Oh, okay, I move on to pass,
All right,
Second,
and then I will
moved and
move
seconded.
on to pass on amendment 1898S.
second.
Okay, so we're working on the amendment now. We have a motion of ought to pass with a second. Any further discussion from the committee? Senator Altshuler, anything further you have a question on?
There's just the add of the one sentence on lines 24, 25, and 26.
Yes, we just changed
Okay.
it from as soon as possible to 7 calendar days. So that we defined that period and it wouldn't be weeks, potentially. Further discussion from the committee?
Oh, that's like a law. That's
Oops,
the
my
same.
apologies.
Boards.
All set? All right. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Janice?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none? Senator also, I'm not sure if you voted.
I have not, I'm still reading, so I'm just looking, so I'm just about at the end. I asked for a moment, so let's do this.
Aye, all right. We have 4. We can't go on consent, correct? Anyway,
No.
correct, Philip?
Okay.
Because of the addendum calendar? Who would like to take this out? Any
Oh,
volunteers?
no, we need a final vote.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I move on to pass as amended.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
All right,
Any opposed?
okay,
Now
so
I'll take a volunteer for taking it out.
this is the addendum calendar?
I will.
Yes, so we can't go on
Okay.
consent anyway.
Got it.
I will.
All right, Senator Carson will bring that up. Thank you, Dr. Why don't we do 250 next? I'm trying to hold off and give Senator Perkins Coker a chance to get here before we get on to the others.
I'm sorry, what did you say you wanted to look at?
Let's do 250 next.
2:15.
Yours, since you brought an amendment in for.
Okay,
Extra ones in the room.
I thought I had 2 in my pocket, but apparently they put them on my desk.
Lisa, I have one right here.
Mr. Chair, I move House Bill 250 ought to pass. So that I might bring in this amendment.
Well, for the purpose of the amendment, I will, actually, how about if you discuss the amendment a little bit before, just what you've changed, before we have an amendment? You know what, I'll
Oh, we have
second
to,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll
Oh,
second it for the purposes of discussion.
Thank you. Okay. So, 250, we had, let me grab my folder. We had all manners of discussion about this one, and I subsequently we had an amendment come in the day of the hearing, I believe, from Senator Susie, and I subsequently, I had some meetings and have altered that to replace what essentially, like, if you just take away Senator Susie's amendment altogether, bring Amendment 1902, and the change is to Section 2B, or only Group 2. And upon accidental death of a Group 2 member, the amount of the state annuity payable shall be equal to 75% of the member's annual rate of earnable compensation at the date of the member's death, but which shall not exceed $125,000. So, we heard that that was in testimony, that was a very small number of people. Good morning. We're on 250.
Good morning.
And you have an amendment in front of you. That was a very small number of people and would help to make up that gap. So, it's not an earth-shattering amendment. I mean, it will be for some people, but I'm gonna razzle-dazzle for you.
I still remain having the same concerns that I did with the $85,000 cap, which would remain in section 1. I just feel like we're going forward with a situation that could be a potential problem. Yeah.
How so? That it's too,
As the,
oh, that it didn't, that it didn't grow with.
yeah, because it doesn't move along with the salary and
With
wage
the salary
increases.
range.
Yeah, and I'm not quite sure how to remedy that.
How often, we may have discussed, how often do the salary ranges, are they reformulated?
I guess every time they get a raise,
Yeah, but annually, it's biannually, right?
It depends.
yeah, I guess
depends,
it could
okay.
depend as they move.
So I recall I have some notes during that, because I have that also circled, that we could possibly address that, and you're looking at in the original bill, line 4, right?
Yeah.
Line
Line
4 and 5.
5, yeah.
4 and 5. So if you go back up to line 4,
I mean, you potentially have the same
You
issue
could-
even with your amendment in
Mhm.
the second section, because it could eventually exceed 125,000, somebody could, depending upon
Well-
the compensation. Because as I recall, we had testimony that we have at least one person that may be up at that level already.
I think they were the 120.
Hmm.
The change, so the change from 50 to 75 added with the change of, from the original bill, average final compensation to annual rate of earnable compensation.
Okay.
Gets us a little closer. I see what you're saying about the cap, though.
Yeah.
I don't think that there was, I think the cap was something that the House needed to get good.
Mr. Chair, at this point, I mean, I think we can kind of go around and around. I think it might be a good idea for us to retain this bill, because I think it needs some more work. I understand why we would like this to happen, but I had questions of, what's the definition of an accidental death? If this doesn't speak to what an accidental death comprises. And I just have concerns about the differences between group 1 and group 2. A death is a death. And it just happens if you fall in group 1, you're not going to get as much as you would if you were in group 2. I just think we just need to look at this and answer those questions that it seems like the committee is struggling with right now. So if, I know that there's
Thoughts from the
a
committee?
motion.
Well, we did have clarification from Marty Carlin, which is on page 3 of the hearing report about, because that was a question that came up. The two types of death benefits were, 100-A8 refers to accidental or job-related death. No minimum service requirement for an individual killed on the job for their beneficiary to receive a lifetime benefit. So, and then A9 was the non-job related death, which required 10 years of service to receive the death benefit. And so this referred to accidental deaths It should be 100A-8.
Right,
So that was
Thank you.
defined.
thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair. I know that that information came from the retirement system, but don't forget, this is not, the money is not gonna be paid from the retirement system. It's coming from state general funds. And we had testimony concerning, workers' comp. And workers' comp determines what is an accidental death. So I think that that language needed to be included in here. And while we're looking at this, the hearing report, I'm looking at the testimony of Mr. Hawkins, who stated that some school districts exceeded the salary of $85,000. So if you're gonna cap them, what do you do if someone earns more than that per year? You're gonna cap them, and they're not gonna be able to do that. And I think there was some question of a sliding scale. And I think that that's something that we should seriously think about. I know oftentimes when we discuss these things, we tend to forget about Group 1, which are our state employees. And I think we need to just really take a long, harder look at this and get it right. Because I don't want to put a state employee or even a teacher, because we know teachers are victims of in schools, and they do get hurt. So I just want to make sure that we're going to be doing the right thing by Group 1.
I'm not opposed to looking at this a little more myself either. I'm not sure that I'm 100% settled on all the aspects of this bill yet. Senator, would you have any
Yeah.
objection to having the committee look at this a bit further?
I
do
withdraw my
appreciate-
motion for it to pass.
I do appreciate your work on the amendment. All right, so I'll withdraw my second. And Senator Carson, did you
I
want to
will
make
make
a
a
motion?
motion of re-refer.
Do we have a second?
Oh,
Second.
second.
Further discussion from the committee? Hearing none, all those in favor of re-refer?
Aye.
Oh, turn it, Mike.
Thank you.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it, and the bill will be re-referred.
Chair, would you want to put this on consent?
We can't,
Okay,
because we're putting it on the addendum calendar.
okay. Oh, sorry, forgot
At
about
least
that.
as I recall, am I correct, there is no consent today? Yeah, okay.
Okay, who's gonna,
Senator Altshuler, would you like to take this up for the committee?
Sure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That sounds delightful.
We can give you,
I think that's gonna kick off my whole Thursday.
oh, good. Well, we like to make your day.
Do that.
So we already
Phil, I
acted
won't
on
be responding to
337.
that email
Just so you
until
know.
8
Okay.
seconds before your deadline, just so we're,
That's fine, you just have to revote.
I know, like, you understand, like, now that we know the stance,
Which one?
yeah.
So,
Were there any changes from last week?
It's not
yes,
you.
just to quickly update Senator Perkins Walker, basically, I
Absolutely
defined
not
the
you.
7 days in 337.
Just
so
like
it
to
was
make
as soon
Kevin
as
have to
possible.
text me
Yeah.
So
18
we defined
times.
7 days and then.
Please respond to Phil.
Discuss what happens at the emergency meetings, how that information becomes. in
I see
committee
him
sessions.
coming around the
Okay.
corner and I'm not in
Yes.
my office, I'm like, oh, it's Phil, isn't it?
All right, so what we have left is the amendment to House Bill 532 and the amendment to 409. I don't have an issue, we can kind of take them both up together if you want to, because they're sort of related, and then we'll have to separate them out to vote on them. But for discussion purposes, I took all of the amendments that we had in the hearings last week, and that were all the ones that were introduced and brought it before the committee, all of the ideas, and Senator Perkins Polk and I have worked on language, and then I took all of the rewrites and discussed them and separated them in a manner that I felt the things that we put in the amendment to 409 are what I believe that everyone is in agreement on, including things that I think will get through the House okay. And then in 532, I put the topics that I felt there might be some needed discussion on, especially with the House, and I tried to do this in a manner so that hopefully we can get a concurrent from the House on 409 and just have one committee of conference. I'm not certain this will work, but that's my hope. So you have as you'll see, the good news is, the larger of the two amendments is House Bill 409.
Yes.
I do know there are still some minor concerns from some of the folks here in front of us as we go through 409. We can certainly see if there's things we need to address. There's a couple of them that have brought concerns, and I've said I would recognize them there, and we'd attempt to address that as a committee because they weren't something that I felt comfortable doing, coming up with language on my own.
Okay.
I know you all just got 409 because it literally came off to me at like 8:40 or 8:30 this morning. So
Okay.
if you'd like to take a minute and review it, but
Please.
what's in here is just the language that we discussed last week, and it just may have been in the other amendment before, for the most part.
Okay.
I'll point out one change. Senator Carson's amendment, which is number 3, the Board of Nursing. She had originally asked for 12 members, and the committee was not comfortable having an even number, so I moved it to 13 members, and I added another member of the board as an LNA to make the 13. So to move the number from 2 to 3, that's on line 26. The first change, to 13 is on line 22. And then I moved on line 26 to 3 licensed nursing assistants. I've discussed this with OPLC and, the Board of Nursing has weighed in that they're okay with the change as well.
Okay. Okay.
Again, section 1 is the barbering and cosmetology. That's the same language that was in last week.
Okay. Yeah, with regards to that,
Yes.
I still have objections voiced by, current members of this licensure that when someone comes in from another state, even if they're in good standing, they don't have to meet the requirements that state residents have to meet in order to get their license in the first place. And it's not, it's an uneven, it's a knock to the people who have gone through our required licensing requirements, education requirements, in-person apprentice requirements, and professional development and keeping, it's not an easy thing to do. And when you do go to somebody who is licensed in New Hampshire, you know that they have had a very rigorous course of study in not only the craft, but in the safety of it. And that is so not the same across the nation. Like it is, like we are in the top third of education requirements and safety requirements, and this throws us right to the bottom, right to the least, the easiest way to get into the profession. And having a license that's currently in good standing in a state that has such little in way of like achieving that license in the first place, I believe, and my constituents that I have talked to, because I've had the occasion to be in many a chair since the last time we heard this, coming up this Friday too, that, this is, they're very distressed and disturbed that their requirements and that their level of achievement and their school achievement is completely wiped away when someone from another state has to do absolutely the bare minimum. And what we know from testimony I brought in here is that 8th grade education is the bare minimum in some of these states. So that's, I object to having this like blanket license in any other state without saying you have to reach the achievement level of New Hampshire.
Before I recognize Senator Carson, there's one more point I want to make, just for the committee. We can move any sections of this around as we all decide we want to, okay? This is how I decided to separate them apart on the information that I had. So I did this so that we'd have a base to work, and we can do committee amendments from this if we want to move a section
Yeah.
or make an alteration in the language, okay? Sorry, I forgot to mention that. Senator Carson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank you for including the language on the Board of Nursing. But I have to echo the concern with my colleague. For some reason, and I don't understand why, whenever we talk about looking at licensure, cosmetologists always rise to the top of the list. Do away with all the licensing, do this, do that. And I agree with my colleague completely. These people that go through these schools, they pay a lot of money and they work extremely hard and they are very, very professional about what they do. And to see them constantly being attacked or undermined, for me, is very disturbing because this is an industry in New Hampshire. Men and women that go. And I agree with the removal of the booth licensure because the establishment is already licensed. But I can't see lowering our standards to accommodate somebody from another state. I agree again with my colleague that we have very, very high standards, and those standards are there for a reason. It is about the safety of the person that's sitting in the chair. I mean, women go, we have all kinds of things done, and I think just as someone who is getting their hair dyed, you think about the chemicals that are being used and how easy it would be for somebody who doesn't really have the knowledge or the expertise, how easily they could hurt somebody. And I know that when I go, one of the first things I do is I look for that license on the wall. They must display their license with their picture so you know who it is. I don't want to take the chance, nor do I want to set up a system where people are going to be very concerned about this. Even if it's so much as putting that comb and that Barbasol, that's all governed by us. And I cannot support lowering the bar for someone who has a license from out of state to come here. If they want to practice here, they have to meet our standards. And plus, they have to be in good standing, and I was glad to see that language included. But, Mr. Chair, I cannot support lowering the standards.
Well, so we can tailor these as we want to. Again, this is a proposed language to start through. So if you want to take section 1, and is it the sense of the committee that we'd like to remove section 1 from this amendment? I know Senator Altschiller and Senator Carson have kind of expressed that.
Where's that, what number is the underlying bill for that one?
409.
409.
Yep.
Oh, it is the beginning, okay.
Yep, it's the very first action in 409, starting on line 8
Yeah,
through
so,
13.
I see, I got that one open here.
So, I mean, is it the sense of the committee that we'd like to remove that language from this amendment?
With the intention of ITLing 409, just to be dispatched with that section altogether?
Well, no, we won't ITL 409, we'll just
No,
remove
just
that section
remove
from the
that.
amendment.
Take it out completely.
Right.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Certainly.
Sorry, just before we get ourselves, I think that there's language in the beginning of the amendment that is now on 409 that concerns barbering, but my understanding was that was not the same language as the original 409 bill.
No, I got that right here.
Okay. I just,
It is
you may
actually,
have already known that, I just,
it is actually, it is the same language.
is it the same language?
Yeah.
Because I've had two people,
13, yeah, it's,
I'm fully fine with
non-residents of
removing
Ward-
that if
yeah.
you want to.
oh, you're right, it is. Yeah, okay.
I think that's
would
just the original
support
part of the bill
removing
to
that.
start.
Yep.
Is it the sense of the committee we'd like to remove, I'd like just to vote on the section 1 here. Would you
Sure.
like to remove that language?
I would be in favor of that.
Yes.
Okay.
So do you want
So
to?
Philip, we're gonna strike
Yeah, okay.
And
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if I may, just make the comment that I know that there are a number of folks that continually work on this particular issue, and I would just say to them, bring back a bill in the fall that deals just with this, rather than trying to lump it in to the rest of all this important language. And that way, we can have that discussion, we can take a look at the rules, and we can work with OPLC and the board to come up with something. Because I'm not objecting to having someone who is licensed in another state come here to work. It's just that they must meet our standards rather than anything else, so.
All right. Philip, you're clear on that? You're removing lines 8 through 13?
Yes.
Okay.
What?
Well, we're just working on the amendment right now. We're gonna do a motion when we're done.
Wait, have we opened the discussion on this amendment? Is that,
We're talking about the two amendments kind of together as we go.
oh, we're open, so he can
Yes.
do this?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, oh, okay, I'm sorry, follow. I thought you couldn't do anything because we had an open discussion.
No,
Got it.
we're discussing,
following the
we're gonna remove that
procedure.
section, then we're gonna move the amendment.
What is the, okay, you said two amendments, I'm like, I have like
Okay,
one
so-
big one.
Lines
We're working on the amendment
8
409
through
right now.
13 are gone.
Which is the number, 1883?
Yes,
Okay, good.
Gone.
we're gonna strike lines 8
Chairman,
through
if you
13.
get us through this hearing, I will be.
It's okay, I'm doing my best.
I'm getting confused now.
Section 2, which is lines 14 through 20, is
Awesome.
language that I
What is it?
presented to you
Just
last
about.
week with the medical imaging and radiation. This was
Okay, and this was not, which number is this now?
same, we'll stay
No,
right
it's
on
not
409. Yeah, we'll stay right on 409.
No, where did this come from? Which one?
In the amendment. No, this,
I know, we're on the amendment.
yes,
but-
this was language that we
Senator
heard last week.
Carson's amendment from last week to 532.
532, that's the one. Because I still have them sectioned out, so.
This was a separate set of language, actually, from the 532 amendment.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, three of them.
This is language that OPLC asked to bring in to, would you like to come up actually and talk about that for a minute, Lindsay and Doug? I know this is confusing, that's why we're gonna work our way through it.
We're working our way through it.
1891 that you brought in, is that like not up, like that's folded into this?
Yes, they're all merged together.
Take it off the table, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're on section 2
Or there's
of
like-
the new 409 amendment, which, do you have a copy of that?
Yes, I was just handed a copy. I
Okay.
appreciate that.
Starting on line 14, this is the medical imaging.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So the background behind medical imaging, Lindsay Corney, Executive Director, New Hampshire Office of Professional Licensure and Certification, is this. There are several different modalities within the medical imaging profession. Several of those modalities are not separately licensed in other states. Particularly, an example is a sonographer, only 4 states, including New Hampshire, licensed sonographers. So the issue is that the large majority of our healthcare facilities utilize travelers to fill their spots, if you will. And so because they are not required to be licensed in other states, they are not licensed in other states, and when they come in here, they are not eligible for our current endorsement or temporary licensing process. So they have to undergo the regular, traditional, permanent licensing process, which requires a criminal history check, including fingerprints for FBI review. The concern is that that takes about 2 to 3 weeks, and it is not uncommon for facilities to have to shut down or discontinuing offering certain imaging services because they have no staff. And obviously that presents a problem from a care standpoint. And so we would propose to allow us to issue licenses pending review of the criminal history check. When looking at the risk-benefit analysis, the travelers are still undergoing a criminal history check of some sorts because they are required to do so by DHHS regulations prior to entering a facility. So we think that the risk is pretty minimal, but the risk of not issuing these licenses is pretty great because we would not, because we're essentially discontinuing care.
Everybody clear on that? Any questions?
Question. So,
Senator Carson?
Thank you for that testimony, Ms. Courtney. I'm wondering, because you said because of the travelers, and we have heard other proposed legislation concerning the fact that we are, especially when it comes to the medical field, we are using this service more and more and more. Do you think it would be better that, that we require any company that's going to do business in New Hampshire to do the criminal background check before they send them to us?
I think this issue came up a couple years ago, and a stakeholder group was trying to figure out what is the best solution to the criminal history record check. There was conversation even in our office of whether or not the criminal history check from the licensing body serves a legitimate purpose, particularly in light of 332G, which limits our ability to deny licensure based on that review. I think that there is a different solution out there that is not necessarily a duplicative criminal history check requirement. In other words, DHHS requires it to work in a facility. We require it as a condition of licensure. There has to be a solution there. We just haven't been able to figure out what that is yet, and I think it requires some more time.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Senator Olson, yes.
Yeah. I think I'm a little uncomfortable with the radiation therapy license being, being just pending a criminal history check. Is this saying that all other aspects of the application have been met?
Yes, and it's actually the method we currently employ for nursing right now. So nurses in New Hampshire, if they're endorsing in or if they otherwise satisfy their requirements, and the only thing that's left is receipt of the criminal history check, we will issue a license pending the receipt of those results. Because the delay is very, very harmful in the sense that you can't continue to provide care. The workforce shortage is so extreme in New Hampshire that it's really limiting our ability to provide care for constituents. That is kind of the cost benefit analysis. So they would have to otherwise meet the requirements, which includes a national certification, typically from ARRT, which is the national credentialing body. And many other states that don't require licensure only require the AART certification. So we're not concerned that they're not minimally competent. The issue is whether or not their character has been checked. But again, I think they're required to be, the criminal history check is required to be performed as a condition of entering a healthcare facility and interacting with patients. So our concern is minimal. There is a risk there, and so I think that we as a state have to, the weigh the benefits versus the risks, but literally 2 weeks ago, Wentworth Douglas Emergency Department had to stop offering ultrasound services because they didn't have anybody. And that's not uncommon.
So I'm sorry, I just want to dial back to something you just said.
Certainly.
That traveling nurses or nurses who are applying in from another location are temporarily licensed to start practicing, even if their criminal history has not been fully vetted. I thought that we didn't do that anymore after the Kwiatkowski, after the traveling nurse in Exeter infected over 30 people with hepatitis C and then we subsequently found out he'd been doing it in other states too. When did we stop doing that?
So I can tell you, not to derail, having worked on the hepatitis C cases from a plaintiff's perspective, I don't think a criminal history check component or licensure would have prevented that. But that said, 332G, I think it's 10, really limits a licensing board's ability to deny licensure based on a criminal history check. If the criminal history conviction is essentially substantially related to the profession. So for example, a DUI for most professions is not going to restrict your ability to practice. What we're saying is that we recognize that the individuals coming in are already undergoing a criminal history check because DHHS requires it of their healthcare facilities. And so they're undergoing a criminal history check for DHHS, presumably through their staffing company, and they're considered okay to enter the healthcare facility. And then separately, we are requiring it as a condition of licensure. Because of the federal limitations, we can't share that information, so it is a duplicative process to some extent. And so during the pandemic, when the workforce shortage particularly became of heightened concern, the Board of Nursing issued an emergency rule and later adopted it as a permanent rule to allow us to continue to issue licenses pending receipt of the FBI results. If something comes back that would be a reason to deny the license application, then the board moves forward with that process. But it has been very few and far between. And I think when we talk about not having enough staff versus the very limited circumstances that somebody who's been previously vetted, has a criminal history, the policy weighs in favor of making sure that we have sufficient staff. That's been the board's determination.
I understand, I hear what you're saying, I understand how you got to that space. I remain concerned that is a significant risk to patients. My hospital had that happen, I respectfully disagree with you about whether that would have been prevented, because indeed that person had been diverting at Michigan hospitals. Nonetheless, in the case of, yes, I understand and I'm wildly aware, I have regular meetings with my hospitals, that, the staffing is very, very difficult right now, very difficult. But to say to somebody who has been victimized by someone who that wouldn't have passed a background check because they're a sexual predator, or they are, I'm not talking about traffic violations, I'm not talking about misdemeanor DUIs, I'm talking about diverting drugs, which is a real thing that really happened, it's not hypothetical, and sexual assaults, which are also real things that are not hypothetical, that to the person who is the victim of that 3 weeks waiting would have made a big difference in their life. So I'm struggling with that piece. I don't think it's, I understand, but when you say the cost benefit analysis of it, like from a victim's perspective, that's a rough.
Would you like to respond?
I would, if you don't mind, Senator.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, and I don't want to sidetrack on the hepatitis C cases, but the issue there is whether or not there were criminal convictions, which wouldn't have shown up on a criminal history check. Putting that aside, the reason why I'm saying that the risk is minimal is because CMS requires DHHS to have a criminal history check requirement. And so what I'm saying is that if we can rely on our sister agency to require healthcare facilities that are also licensed to require criminal history checks, can we rely on their assessment that, for example, they are not allowing people into their facility who have been convicted of sexual assault? I think we can. And I think what we have seen throughout the pandemic, in particular with the workforce shortage, is that there's this duplicative process with criminal history checks. And we haven't been able to figure out a solution because we can't share information. Other states have been able to figure out a solution that requires more time. But in the interim, what I'm saying is I think we can reasonably rely on our sister agency to require that this be vetted from a facility standpoint and not from a licensure standpoint. I am not saying at all that victims should think 3 weeks should be sufficient. What I'm saying is I think they are being vetted by other entities that are regulated by the state.
All right, so we've had pretty good discussion on this, and we do have a long way to go. I guess I want a sense from the committee, are we okay with section 2?
One final question. When you say that, if somebody comes back and there is a criminal history and now now you have knowledge of that and you're not you can't share, which I would love to explore at another time. And now that will affect that temporary license? Is that suspended immediately?
It's not a temporary license, it's considered a permanent license, and it requires the individual, if it gives rise to an emergency situation, which has not happened, the board can suspend immediately if it otherwise meets those requirements.
Thank you for the clarification, thank you.
Okay, so it sounds like we're okay with that section. We'll go on to page 2, section 4. And I'm actually trying to remember where this came from, my apologies. Is that part of,
Section
is that part of your amendment?
Okay, I have a question for OPLC about back here. Do you want me to wait until?
Let's wait till we get through the sections, I think. You guys don't mind staying for a little bit?
Oh, no, we're
I
fine.
suspect for a ways along here, you're gonna be kind of involved.
And, Mr. Chair, when
Yes.
you were putting this together,
Yes.
were you, working off amendment 1499? Should I be doing a comparison with this or with the original bill?
It's working off from 1778, 1660,
16, got that one.
1743,
1660.
and I think there, right here, and 1712.
So not 1499.
No, 1489 is in here.
Okay, so I'll put that over there.
Okay, so section 4, I'm trying to remember which one it came out of, and my apologies.
So section
I think that came out of
4.
yours, out of 1778, right?
Oh,
Authority
section
to grow.
4, Board of Nursing, I think is still part of Senator Carson.
Yep, that one was fine.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies, that's where my confusion was. Okay, so we were okay with section 4 then, because that was part of the other that we already discussed. Okay, sorry about that. We'll get this.
Go get it.
Section 5, barbering cosmetology, this is the booth licensure.
Yes.
Okay, so we're on page,
No need, we're on page 2, starting on line 10.
Yep.
This was removing the booth license requirement. Was everybody okay with that?
yes.
Yes, there were no issues raised in
Yep.
hearing.
And that also is section 6.
Yes.
Section 7 was the optometry, removing the word annually.
Yes, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Section 8, I believe, starts into what was in your amendment, right?
Correct.
All right, I'm gonna let you take over from here for
Okay.
a while.
So, I'm not sure what's helpful there. Basically, we start on page 2, line 34, and for a while, what's been incorporated here is the content of 1499 from last week with some further changes responsive to the hearing that we had last week. So, is it helpful for me to go through the changes from 1499?
I think it was
all
1778,
changes?
wasn't it, not 1499? Because I think this was the revised version.
This, well, yes, but there's been no the hearing was on 1499.
Oh, I'm sorry, the revised version. That is your revised version,
That's
my
my
apologies.
revised version,
My
yes.
apologies, you're right, I have the new revised one. Yes, so go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so
So the changes from 1499.
changes from
If you want to
1499.
just quickly highlight it, because most of them were very technical.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Chair, at this point, can someone please clarify which amendment because I'm sorry, I'm looking at all these amendments and
We're on
I'm like,
1883,
okay, so this
We're on-
is what we have in front of us.
page 2.
So what are we doing with 1499?
That
I
was
know
a
I'm
reference.
confused, and I hope the members of the public can understand
So
what we're trying to do.
1499 was the amendment that we heard
Correct.
last week. We've taken the content from that and put it into this new amendment.
Yes, I understand
With the
that.
changes that Senator Perkins Polk is making in response to what we had from the hearing last
Okay,
week.
so we should be looking at the both of these together. Okay.
Yes, and my
All right, thank you.
apologies on confusing the other one. I
Thank
had
you for clearing that up.
Oh,
the new mock-up.
It's all good. Okay. All
I
right.
share the same confusion.
So I am on Amendment 1883, which is what we have in front of us today, to 409. I'm on, starting on page 2, line 34. Okay, so some of the feedback we heard from OPLC was that including the definition of allegation and complaint was in fact not helpful, and I think with the combination of the language we've added procedurally under 310, section 9 now, I think we may have created the needed clarifications there. I know there's still some concern about removing these definitions, but for now, the definition of allegation and complaint has been removed.
I'm sorry, you said page 2, I'm looking at page 2, I don't see any
Okay,
language.
so if we move over to page 3, there's definitions under section 3010 to, starting on line 13, there's some definitions under there.
Okay,
Originally, the definition of allegation and complaint were both included here to try to create some procedural clarification. And so OPLC raised an issue with that to me, so those have been removed.
So
okay. they're
I
done.
know,
Okay,
I'm gonna refer back to OPLC here off and on, because you folks came in with some concerns still, and my apologies, even when I opened it this morning, it wasn't, the format wasn't right, so I couldn't really understand and read what your concerns were. I received an email from them last night after
Okay.
sharing the language that we were gonna use. And,
Okay.
And my apologies, but I'm having some kind of a format error as I tried to open up your comments, so
It could have been my error, Senator.
did you have any concern with the language in 310.2 with the definitions?
We appreciate the change. The only comment we had was that license is already defined in 541A1. And so it may not be necessary to define it here.
If I may,
Senator,
Chair?
please,
Yeah, so I think the reason we included that was because when we heard from Steve Raincourt and the electricians, there was just, it was helpful to the folks in the room to be explicit about the fact that apprentices were included under license. So I don't disagree with you, but I don't know that this is a harmful change. And then the other change that was included here is that, the reciprocal licenses under 332G14 were included in the definition of license. And then somebody raised that we needed to include a definition of board.
Yes, that was in our,
Has
that was in the
been
original
added.
discussion back in April. That we had to that board needed to be inserted.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those are the changes to that section from last week. And I know there's still a little bit of discussion that
okay.
is open on that. Okay, are we all,
Mhm.
we're all together. Okay, so now I go to, and again, both myself and I'm sure Senator Pearl asked for all the language that was not changed to be removed from this, but OPLC is not comfortable with that because 655 hasn't been passed yet.
OLS.
So, OLS.
Yes, it's okay.
Too many acronyms. Okay, so if we're all going together, I'm on page 8 now. Line 18 is the next change that I made
Oh, okay.
from last week.
Telemedicine.
So lines 4, 5, 6,
no.
and 7 didn't have any changes. I mean, pages, 4,
Page-
5, 6, and 7.
correct.
Yes.
I'm sorry, page 8, line
18.
18.
We added 332B
Mhm.
to allow for some telehealth by veterinary services.
That was a request we received last week.
Correct.
Before we skip any further, OPLC, did you have any further issues with anything that we've gone up through page 8? Okay,
No, we didn't. Thanks.
okay.
Okay. I now take us to page 9, lines 19 and 20. And this has been something that's been going back and forth. OPLC needs a term to be stated in here, an express term of 2 years, and so I included that, but there was still concern that their apprentice licenses could run for 1 year, and Senator Altschiller and Steve Raincourt had a conversation about education and sort of apprentice licenses lasting for 1 year. So it now reads, licenses shall be valid for 2 years from the date of issuance, or if different, the term stated on the license for apprentices. I'm open to feedback if anyone doesn't like that, but I'm trying to strike a balance here.
No, we appreciate that. And we don't have concerns with apprenticeship registrations being for 1 year. I think there's another way to approach the concerns in terms of monitoring, but but that's neither here nor there. But my main concern remains that, that the term stated on the license governs the term, and there has to be a statutory authority for the term, and there may not be a statutory authority. So I might rephrase it to be something like licenses shall be valid for 2 years from the date of issuance, except that apprenticeship registrations shall be valid for 1 year, or something to that effect, to make it explicitly clear in statute as to what the term should be. But we don't have a concern with the substance.
Well, let's wordsmith it right now while we're here. 'cause
Let's do it.
we
Except that apprenticeship, I'm sorry, one more time?
Mechanical apprenticeships are 2 years. I just wanted to point that out. Because there is difference.
I think in terms of, I agree with you, Doug. In terms of implementation, I think we need to be consistent at the office so we don't get back into a scenario where everybody has different terms and it's difficult to implement. And I think that, I mean, it's up to the legislature. We don't have a problem with moving apprenticeships to 1 year. But I would make it, from our perspective, I think it would make it across the board.
And I don't know if this comment's going to be helpful, but we had a 3-hour conversation with Steve Rancourt, and I think that this could actually be handled in rule, because a lot of it is that enrolling in an education program type of requirements, and in rule they could make that a requirement of the apprenticeship. So I'm not sure a legislative change is necessary if we're struggling with language here today.
Does the or if different cover that though? Like, or if different? And then, you know, you've introduced the difference.
Or except for those apprentices licensed for 1 year.
As established by rules in accordance with 541A or something like that. You need that statutory authority. We would be fine with that because then we would be able to establish rules as to which one the 1 year requirement implies. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, but it's not an OPLC rule, it's a board rule because they set the criteria and the education standards. So
So do the board rules have to go through GELCAR?
it would,
They do.
all of the, OPLC or the board rules would have to go through GELCAR,
I
but,
thought so, but I wanted to confirm that, so.
So
but
are
I
you
think that kind of crosses the line
saying at the
between
end of
process and
20,
criteria, and
except
the
established by
education
rules?
piece is something
what
we,
you're saying?
the boards want to maintain control over.
Yeah, so I
So
added
do we have a
this language
suggestion for?
Right there?
Yeah.
So you could make it explicit in statute, apply to all registrations being 1 year. That would be the cleanest. Or if there's concern that some professions prefer the 2 year requirement, that you could leave it to rule.
You want to word that?
I'm listening and I'm thinking, except for those apprentices licensed for 1 year pursuant to rulemaking under 541A. We had some nods.
We would be fine with that.
Okay.
Okay, so what's the sentence gonna read then?
Okay, so the sentence will read, licenses shall be valid for 2 years from the date of issuance, comma, except for those apprentices licensed for 1 year pursuant to, can I just say 541A?
Yeah. You could say in accordance with rules adopted under 541A or something to that effect.
Pursuant, in,
Except for those apprentices.
licensed for 1 year in accordance
It's okay.
with rules adopted pursuant to 541A. Okay.
I'm hearing a sigh to my right.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
Okay.
Bill, you got it?
What's the number one more time? 5 what A?
541.
541.
541, yes.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
thoughts from the committee on this? Are we okay with this language? Yes?
Yeah, this will probably go to a committee, a conference, and that's where you're gonna really hammer the language out. So, it will give OPLC time for Mr. Osterhaus to speak to Mr. Rancourt and get the exact
Simon's nodding
language.
yes, so.
So there will be a time, there will be time to do this, so,
All right, we're okay with that then?
Yep, we'll see what happens.
All right, Senator Perkins Coker?
All right, I'll proceed with my thrilling presentation. Okay, if we go to now on page 10, starting around line 21 and following,
I
there.
need one clarification before you
Yes,
move
sir.
on. Are we striking out the rest of that paragraph? Meaning licenses shall be valid for 2 years from the date of issuance, except for those apprentice licensed 1 year in accordance with the rules adopted in 541A. That now becomes the whole paragraph? The rest of it is gone?
You could, 549A, 29A already provides authority for the second half. I think this was intended to make it clear that we have to follow that. But we could rely on 549A, 29A, I think it is.
At that time, the incomplete application for license renewal shall continue the validity of the licenses being renewed until the office is active.
Or are we just going to that comma where it ended in parentheses?
Yeah, I was thinking we would
Okay,
leave the rest of that
okay,
language.
I'm fine with that. I just wanted to, that's what I
Okay.
originally struck out. I just wanted to be clear. All right, cool.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you for the clarification. Okay, so now if we flip for real to page 10,
Page 10.
I believe the next request for a change. Dun, 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 was on line 25. And the request was to change may to shall, so it now reads each board shall dismiss a complaint if the board concludes the allegations do not state a claim of professional misconduct. And everyone, I think, was in agreement on that change. The next change was to remove on line 29, upon direction by the board, because we wanted the investigations to be impartial from the board.
Mhm.
The next removal was at the end of line 32. I removed except as provided for the Board of Accountancy pursuant to 309B because we didn't want to create a special exception for one profession. And then I also added in the same line of a licensed or unlicensed individual or entity of a profession regulated under the office, just to clarify OPLC's jurisdiction.
Is that it on page 10?
These are all on page 10, yes.
But that's it, all the changes on 10?
That is all the changes on page 10.
Any comments from the committee on where we are up to now? You guys okay?
I'm actually following along here. I got all, because I have my notes from
Okay,
our discussions, yeah.
Okay, so now if I move,
Hold on a second.
So,
Doug?
all right, I'm going through, I'm trying to juggle
I
all
know.
the different things
It's
here, and I have
confusing.
comments from yesterday and not necessarily on my 409. So you want to talk about A and B?
Yeah.
So I pointed out, I don't think it's necessarily problematic, but in the new 2A, so I'm looking at line 23 on page 10.
Yep.
That section, that's B. Sorry, B. If the office determines that the allegation does state a claim on its face, the office shall make a recommendation to the board for investigation. I think one of our primary concerns, and this came out of the SB 330 study committee, is that in a lot of cases, when we receive a complaint, when we have to go to the board for permission to even begin investigating, we're seeing significant delays in the process, and that leaves potentially dangerous individuals practicing with a license, and it also delays any sort of satisfaction for the complainant. I think the recommendation out of 330 was once we, the office, receive a complaint, we make that determination on its face in the first instance, whether the claim has merit. In cases where they do have merit, we begin our investigation immediately. And then we put together that recommendation, and then we bring that to the board, and that's when they decide whether they agree with the recommendation or whether to dismiss or to proceed with an adjudicative hearing. And then they make that determination. But I think the language as is, if we have to go to the board just to investigate, we're right back in the position we were in a year ago where we're gonna see those significant delays.
And Chair, that, just for the record, that's consistent with what we heard in hearing last week, is that the investigation should be independent from the board.
Yes.
So I think that's a good,
So would it be your suggestion we strike?
I
B?
would strike B.
Is the committee okay with that?
so if the office determines that the allegation does not state a claim, like A concerns what happens if the allegation
Right.
does not state a claim. If the office determines the allegation does state a claim, I do think we need some alternative.
Okay.
I almost think it's covered by, and maybe you could word it differently, by paragraph 3, because it requires the board to investigate allegations of misconduct. Ultimately, the office's recommendation, whether to dismiss or completed investigation, will go to the board for disposition. So I think you could rely on paragraph 3. You could make it clear that it applies in circumstances where the office determines that a claim has been stated.
Maybe the simplest way to do it today would be, instead of line 28 reading, shall make a recommendation to the board for investigation, we could just say, shall proceed under section 3.
That would do it.
Okay,
So
shall
proceed under section 3. So we'll remove, make a recommendation for the Board of Investigation,
Yes.
and shall proceed under paragraph 3.
Yes.
Okay. That works for everybody?
Beautiful.
All right,
Okay, thank you. Okay.
moving on.
All right.
Smoke it.
Are you good? Philip, you okay? You got that? All right.
We got that, okay. In the exact same vein, my next change is on page 11. We're on line 4. I removed, after retain qualified experts, I removed the language approved by the appropriate board for the same reasons, okay? And then on line 7 and 8, there was concern about how I had drafted, clarifying which portion of a residence is available for inspection by OPLC. So I tried to make this stronger. I hope that I did. What we're trying to do is just say, you know, OPLC can go into the portion of a residence where a person is working, you know, where the professional equipment is located. So,
Simon, I know you had concern and Steve had concern here.
Yeah, I think the only concern is, and we appreciate the professional equipment, is just defining that a little bit more. And I was just gonna say, this is just.
Simon, if you're gonna speak, I'll have to have you come up to the mic. I know you had a concern with this area, and that's why I wanted to invite you into the conversation, because I wasn't comfortable making a change to
Right.
get this to where you wanted it.
Thank you. Simon Thompson with Sheehan Finney Capital Group, here on behalf of the Electrical Contractor Business Association. And a lot of the members in that association are really small companies. So a lot of what their concern is just the ability to just show up at your home, where your home office is, and to come into that home. And I think this gets us much closer, because you did say where professional equipment is located, and I guess maybe just defining that a little bit, and I'm just gonna put this out there. Right at the end of the sentence, so here are on page 11, line 8, located, comma, and does not include equipment such as computers, filing cabinets, or other home office type equipment. That's basically what they're just wanting, some assurance that they're not, you know, professional equipment is for an electrician, it's largely going to be in their truck or in their supply closet. That's fine, but we just felt that that still could be interpreted as, well, we can come in here and inspect your home office.
So if we were to say not to include standard office equipment,
Home office type equipment, yes. That would be fine for me, but I don't know.
Doug, would you have an issue with it?
I like the whole idea, but two things I want to point out. One, the Fourth Amendment already protects this sort of thing. We would potentially need a warrant If we were gonna go into somebody's home and the business owner license holder said no, we would have to go get a warrant. So those protections are in place. We'd have to show probable cause and limit it to certain things. And then the other thing, I'm okay with the language as it is, but I did make a suggestion in the document that you couldn't open, something more along the lines of,
I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
all right, just something along the lines of conduct related to the profession occurs, limited to area to where conduct occurs. But if those type of things, like we don't want people looking through personal computers, filing cabinets, those sort of things, I don't think we have any objection to those extra restrictions and limitations.
Okay, so if I may then, and again, I'm not, no pride of authorship here, but again, on line 8 and page 11 of this most current amendment, if you wanted to add right at the end, instead of located period, located comma, and does not include equipment such as computer filing cabinets or home office equipment, something along those lines. If you just want to do home office equipment, that would be.
Everybody okay with it? Does not include home office equipment? All right.
That's
I'm
what
good
I
with
wrote down.
All right. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you guys. Thank you, Senator Polka.
Yeah. Okay.
Philip, you got that? All right. All right.
Can I ask a question about that
Yes,
part?
go ahead, Senator.
So this actually applies to anybody who has a home office, not just electricians,
Right.
and so would apply to, here's the scenario, it would apply to, say, a therapist who uses an ensuite on their house.
Yep.
And if the allegation is that they are, not,
Acting appropriately.
they're not acting appropriately, for instance, in keeping their patient's information protected, and you would want to investigate that it's not available to anybody who walks through that office, that they are indeed practicing confidentiality, and the complaint is that other patients can see the notes and the such and such from other patient before, then that precludes you from going into their office and seeing that they're not protecting patients' information, right?
Yeah, I think we would have to seek a court order in order
Okay,
to
so
do
that's
that.
still available to do that. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I don't wanna
No, I-
protect one group
I
and then
understand.
leave a gaping hole open for,
Well, Senator,
And I,
yeah.
sorry.
I'll say, Senator, respectfully, that's why we're
See.
having the conversation here,
Yeah.
because I wasn't comfortable figuring this out on my
Yeah.
own. Go ahead. Doug.
I was just gonna say, I shared some of those concerns, and what I'm gonna do too, I think, is once I see the final language, I'm just gonna say it, but I'm gonna take a hard look at it and see if we can find that balance too.
Okay.
I'm expecting it will.
All right. Senator Perkins spoken. Continue on.
Okay.
Sorry, Senator Carson had a question.
So, no, not a question, Mr. Chairman. We're on page 10 of 47
Page 11.
pages.
Yep.
Okay, page 11 of 47 pages. It's now 10:15. We have additional bills that we need to go through.
We do.
I don't know if we're gonna be able to get through all of this today.
I think the rest
I
of it's
don't
gonna
think
go a
this,
lot quicker.
yeah, there's not
It's
much
gonna,
more.
well, I hope that it will, because again, I will just make the statement that
I got my eye on the
whatever
court.
there are really big issues, that these things can be resolved in a committee of conference, so.
I'm gonna keep pushing until we get almost to noon, but I think we're gonna be there before.
Okay.
All right, Senator Perkins spoken.
Yeah, okay, this one should be easy, page 11, line 21. The suggestion was made for it to read when an allegation or complaint of misconduct is determined to be unfounded. So I included that.
Okay.
Okay, and then there are several pages with no changes. In fact, don't know if okay, there were actually no further changes from the 1499 hearing. I just have one comment for you, Chair.
Sure.
Which is, the only thing that I found that did not get carried over into today's amendment, was section 28 of 1499.
What page was that on, 1499?
It would be on page 23, and it concerns the repeal of a statute related to OPLC investigations. And so if it is covered elsewhere, that would be a reason for it not to be included, but
It's on your page 23, it's not on
I
ours.
know, I'm just looking.
13, so part 13?
yeah,
Under
line 13, correct.
And so it would be page 46 of 49,
Page-
1883.
Correct.
Page 24, all right. So, yep, it would be, it'd be the very last page. So the OPLC investigations, so I'm interested why they crossed that out.
Do you want to add that back in? Is that what you're saying?
I think that it's important to add back
Yeah.
in because it is a
Do you
statute.
see what we're talking about, Lindsay? So,
No, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time following.
On
very last page of the amendment from last week.
1499.
Oh,
Here's last week's.
okay,
The repeal of the OPLC investigations 310A1J.
yes.
For some reason, that was not carried into our new amendment.
Where else did we see that? Because we had a concern that it was not included.
I don't know where we saw it, but we did, we did see, oh, because I came up last week. It was in the amendment that Senator Rosenwald addressed, and that had the repeal of 310A1A through P,
All of it.
all of A1.
Right.
So I think it would just be duplicative. So if it's,
Right,
if
but
it's,
I just didn't see that more inclusive repeal in today's amendment. And so I just want to make sure we don't lose it.
Yeah, that would need to be included, otherwise we'd have,
So we'll add that next.
Okay.
thank you.
Okay.
It may have just been an oversight on OLS and moving it over. Good catch.
Okay.
So
All
we're
right,
adding-
Add page 23, lines 13 and 14 from
If you want to send it,
right there,
okay.
1499. Back in.
So it will be the repeal of OPLC investigations, RSA 310A1.
I might actually suggest just the entire repeal of 310A1A, which is all of OPLC, and make it contingent upon this 655 passing, because the issue is if there is nothing, or if this passing, I don't know if this is going to end up being narrowed to what is actually proposed to be changed between 655 and this. So the concern is that if 310A1A, which is OPLC's Practice Act, is not repealed and this goes into effect, we would have conflicting law.
Okay, so 310A1A,
Yes, that's all of OPLC.
in fact, I actually would take, you've got the language right here in your amendment from last week.
okay,
So I'm gonna give that to Tricia.
that's fine,
Okay.
okay.
So for,
I appreciate everyone's patience, this does get a little technical.
All right.
and then if you can give that back, because I want to raise this. one more time. Thanks, Tricia. Okay, we're working it. Okay. I'm turning the mic back over to you, Chair.
All right, so we've been through the entire amendment. I guess I want a sense from the committee, we're gonna remove section 1, and then we've made conditional, changes throughout the rest of the document.
Well, and I think you wanted to, you've also included the approval of the social work compact, right?
Yes, did we
Okay.
skip that? Where did I skip that?
Starts on page 24.
I guess I skipped ahead, I'm sorry. We must have gone by and back. Yes, I did. Make sure we cover everything. Yes, Doug.
Thanks. On page 19, line 21, section 3, it says except as, or line 22, we're talking about appeals from decisions on rehearings. The majority of them go to the Supreme Court under RSA 541, and then it says except as specified in RSA 674:34. In the document, again, you couldn't open sent you language actually expanding that a little bit, because there are a handful, maybe 2 or 3 other boards that have different appeal rights than a right to the Supreme Court. Some of them go to the Superior Court. And so it's just sort of like or other applicable or not expressly stated in other statute kind of language, so that those appeal rights are preserved. And I just wanted to point that out.
So how do I need to fix it?
I think I already sent you the language and I can do it again.
But we're gonna do it right now.
Yeah, we
Okay.
gotta do it in the committee.
I wish I had that in front of me, because it struggled it.
You could say, except as specified in RSA 674-34 or other applicable statute,
H9.
something to that effect.
Or other applicable statutes?
Are you okay with something like that?
Yeah, I had something about expressly stated in another statute, but something along those lines. And then if we have a committee of conference, we can hammer out the finer details at that point.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I know that you've already gone over section 3, but I do know that the Board of Nursing met last night specifically to consider the proposed language and had some comments and concerns. I didn't know if you wanted to hear from them on that.
The message I got back is they were okay.
Okay,
That's the message I got back from Sean.
I'm sorry.
That's the message I got back from Sean Thomas.
Oh, I mean the Board of Nursing, not the Nursing Association.
Oh, okay. All right, I'm sorry.
Not a problem. I'm not here representing the Board of Nursing. I know somebody is here if you wanted to hear from them on that. Just wanted to point that out.
If they have a very quick comment, I will take it.
Thanks for your time.
Good morning, my name is Rakia Medley. I'm board counsel for the Board of Nursing. I do have written testimony that you can consider. In general, to be quick, I know you have a long morning this morning. The board does oppose the amendment that was outlined, but in part, and they do support it in part. In terms of the board makeup, I think you have addressed it with the 13-member change. So that was a concern to have an even number on a board and a decision-making body. Additionally, the amendment requires that one of the RN members represent nursing education. This does raise concerns about confidentiality, which I've outlined that has been outlined in the written testimony with someone being involved in education and have additional knowledge through the board. It could pose a conflict of interest. Finally, the board is willing to work with this committee and any other stakeholders to make any amendments, but this amendment seems to have been done quickly without input from the Board of Nursing, which is our regulatory body for these licensees. But I can provide this to you in writing, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Senator Carson, did you have a question on this? I know this was yours.
Yeah, I thank you. I had received an email and I thought it was in here from a nursing organization that had put together a group of stakeholders. I think it's the Southern New Hampshire Nursing Services. I'm sorry, again, I don't have the email in front of me. And these were requests that they had made. They had worked together with a number of nurses about how to improve the board. And I thought that it was entirely appropriate that there should be someone addressing the issue of nursing education. We do have a number of nursing schools, both at the community college level as well as the baccalaureate level, to take a look at the different types of curriculum, what's being taught, what should be taught, that's not being taught, so on and so forth. So it's kind of interesting to hear that this is something that the nursing board doesn't look kindly on, I would imagine. And the other issue, I don't think there would be an issue about the subcommittees because you're doing it anyway. It's just giving you the statutory authority to form the study committees. But I think it's entirely appropriate to expand the board to 13. And to also have another licensed nursing assistant, because we are depending increasingly more and more on LNAs to do work. So I understand the nursing board's comments, but I do think that the changes that are being recommended are going to work out well for the board.
And to be clear, the board does have 2 dedicated individuals that work with the board and with the educators that are directly in contact with the school systems that provide education for any of the license types that fall under the Board of Nursing. So we do have that in place. There is a very good communication between the schools and the board in that way. We do have real life examples of information that was received through the board that was then used for gain in the private sector. So that is a concern that the board does have.
Okay, thank you. Again, this was a group of nurses that were put together, and this was a recommendation that they had asked us to consider. Obviously, then there's some sort of disconnect between the board and its members, that if you have already 2 dedicated members that are dealing with education, why are they asking for someone, a new person, an additional person? There's a disconnect there. And again, I don't have a problem with putting an additional person, putting 2 other people on the board that reflect what's going on here in New Hampshire. And if you end up having 3 people dealing with education, I don't really see that as being an issue, because it is vitally important to make sure that our nurses achieve a very high level of education, and that the board does continue to work very closely with schools to meet the requirements of licensure to provide nursing for nursing personnel for our hospitals. I don't think I need to tell you about how many hospitals today, not only public, we do have private hospitals as well as nursing homes, are depending upon traveling nurses because we just don't have them. And we don't have enough nurses here. So again, I do not have an issue with having 1 more person be on the board for nursing, and to have nursing education, and to have 1 more person representing the licensed nursing assistants. I don't see that as being problematic.
And to be clear, it's not that the number is expanding, it's that I think the language that we had reviewed, we didn't have the language from this morning, which I think is pretty similar. It's having that inside information in terms of being able to use that information gained in a confidential setting for personal gain. So in the testimony that was provided, there are some alternatives potentially to have someone that is disinterested in terms of the education setting, but does have the knowledge about education. But the board is completely willing to work with this committee and any other constituents to come up with appropriate language for this. This was done in a relatively short period of time, and the Board of Nursing did not have the opportunity to fully review all of this, but did come together in a special meeting to discuss this last night because it was of great concern.
If I may, can you please explain how, because I'm looking at this language where it talks about the requirement for this new person who's going to be working on education. They have to be a resident of the state, licensed in good standing, engaged in the practice of nursing as an RN. And then it goes on to say, shall specifically represent nursing education, minimum of a master's degree in nursing or health-related field and at least 5 years of educational experience in a nursing program offering a degree to a registered licensed nurse. Could you had said something about personal gain. How does that relate to personal gain?
I apologize, maybe not personal gain, but gain within the educational setting to have inside information that may be proprietary. The education that is developed in this state does need to go through the board for vetting in terms of making sure the requirements are met. There are some programs that have unique ways to provide education, and that's being utilized. So that information, which could be a benefit to one institution, and then another institution uses that, so they then essentially take that sort of unique idea to utilize, which is, again, not fair if it wasn't independently developed by each institution.
Can-
Thank you. One more follow-up?
Yeah, I'm having difficulty following what you're saying. I can understand where there might be a concern about proprietary information, but once a student becomes part of that program, that information is out there. There's no big secrets about what's in a program, what's in a requirement. You get a class syllabus. When you get a college catalog, it'll say you have to have these classes in order to fit our requirements for you to get a baccalaureate degree. So I don't understand where this idea of proprietary information is coming from. And quite frankly, if there was a concern about proprietary information, the board can always go into non-public and have a discussion about it, and then it would bind all the board members from discussing it outside of the meeting. I just don't, I'm sorry, I'm just not following your train of thought here.
I'm gonna give you one more quick
Sure.
follow-up, then we gotta move on. I got a
Yeah,
long
no,
way to go.
no problem.
Thank you. Go ahead.
And just to address that, while yes, that is true, there are those protections. I cannot say those are always followed by board members and not just specific to the Board of Nursing. So that is a concern. And then I apologize, there was one more thing. Sorry, I apologize. There was.
Just one last thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One quick
You just basically said that you have boards and board members that are not following the law, which is 541, I believe it's, no, 91A. You go into a non-public, nobody talks about anything. And are you telling us here today that there are boards and board members that are not following 91A?
I have suspicions and nothing concrete, and so that is a concern. I don't want it to become an issue. I do try to provide that counsel and advice. But again, this amendment, the Board of Nursing, it opposes in part and supports in part. And I did want to bring those concerns to you in your reviewing of this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have a long way to go here, but I appreciate you coming in today. Thank you. Dr. Warner, I'm not going to take a lot of public testimony. I'm going to give you one quick comment if you've got one, because I've got a long ways to go. I'm going to give you about 1 minute. So.
Thank you very much. I'd like to refer you on some technical things from my handout from last week on page 6. And that is that there were some things that were technical additions to this or edits on this that needed to happen that I did not see in 1883. And starting with adding a section for misconduct, which I did not see in 1883. If you look at page 6, you can see that there. Okay. If you look at page 6 also at the bottom, under sanctions, 310.12, there were some additions to that are sanctions being used right now, that are in statute right now, that should be continued. And then in page 7, that continuing on in section 2 of that previous needed some elaboration, and I suggested it, some wording for that. That would be useful to the boards in their following these things. In the last thing, there was under Roman 5 of that same section, to refer to the original statute on the cost of investigations instead of including that in this right here.
Thank you, Dr. Mark. I know,
In terms of policy, I just want to register that I'm quite disappointed.
thank you. Senator Perkins Coke, I know you had the info to work with and have worked in what you felt was necessary.
Yeah, I think that, you know, we just can't accommodate, you had quite extensive comments, and so, you know, this is a late in the process, I think, to be incorporating all that. So I did try to take some of your comments into account, but, you know, after conversation, I think, you know, what's most important here is to make sure sort of the procedure is followed, and everybody else seems to be happy with the language. So I am trying to accommodate some of your comments, but I just don't think we can fit a lot of them in here at this stage.
Thank you, Dr. Mark.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna continue on. Page 24, we've got one more section of this that we haven't discussed. Doug, is Lindsay still here? Okay. So I've included the social work compact that I brought in last week. And this is on page 24, starting on line 13, which is section 2728. I was hoping Lindsay could speak to that. Are you able to talk to that at all? Okay, fair enough. So this is a compact, and I'm going to give you the brief understanding that I have. This
okay.
is the social work compact that I brought in last week and discussed, and we talked. Everyone, I think, had an opportunity to look at it and review, and we have an opportunity to adopt it. So I've included it in sections 26 and 27. That is the language, and my apologies, I missed it when we were flipping through before, because I skipped over and went to the end to make the other change. So I just want to make note that that's in there. And I believe that completes everything that is in this amendment.
You've done a great job, Chair. I wondered if I could raise one more thing.
Certainly, now's the time.
In your amendment to 532 last week,
Yes.
which was number 1660, you also included some contingency and effective date language, and I just wanted to raise to you if we felt that should be included here as well.
So I did include that to OLS, and I highlighted what I thought should be, and they didn't include it.
Okay.
I'm not certain whether it needed to be or not. I'm kind of relying on them to, they understood, and I did include that in my draft to them.
Okay. Okay.
So
They know better than I.
I felt that they left it out because they didn't feel it was necessary, because the numbering obviously was completely different in this. And they just went with a simple effective date of all of it coming at the same time.
Yeah, 655 has not been signed yet.
No, but I think they were comfortable that it was close enough that they were going to.
Okay. Thank you.
So I saw that as well.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going very
Senator Olson.
quickly. Where's optometry now?
Optometry.
It is now on page 2.
Thank you.
Yes, oh yes, we were by that. Section 7, line 25.
Okay, awesome. I'm good. I just wanted to
So
review something.
would
that-
you like to review the other amendment before we do any motions? There's only two simple things in the other
What
amendment.
other amendment?
The
Oh,
amendment to 532.
1891?
I'm sorry, I don't have it right in front of me. I do,
Yes.
but
1891.
it has gotten very much mixed in. There it is.
So if I read this correctly, Chair, this actually has no changes from last week.
It does not.
Okay.
These were the two items that I knew were of concern to the House, so I put them in a separate bill.
And just to bring this conversation full circle, like what's in front of us does not include any language that is being re-included from what the House removed from HB2.
It does not.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, just so you know, I have to leave at 11:30.
Got it.
I have
We're gonna
Rules
move,
Committee.
we're gonna move on this right now. So, I think we I think we have a good sense from the committee of the amendment to 409.
Where? Oh. Yeah,
I think we're comfortable
I
that
think
we've
we're-
got them as we've gone
can
along.
I ask you a quick question?
Because we'll be
Yes.
here for-
This one right here,
I'm sorry.
for 1891?
That's gonna be an amendment to 532, we haven't discussed it.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
You're okay, that's all right, I know there's a lot.
It's not in 409, okay, thank you.
So I'm gonna accept at this point an a motion on 409. Would anybody like to move?
I'll move on to pass.
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second.
You a second? All right.
Until 409's amended, I don't like it, so.
And now I'll move the amendment to 409, Amendment 1883S. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, so we've thoroughly gone through and discussed this amendment. Is there any further committee discussion before we adopt it? Yes, go ahead.
Just so I have the right changes to Senator OLS, on page 19,
Yes.
line 23, you added some language, and I didn't get all of it, I just want to be sure it's correct.
Okay, line 22?
22 or 23?
Yeah, right after RSA 674-34,
Yes.
or other applicable statutes.
That's what I had as well.
All right. Further discussion from the committee?
I would just like to state, Chair, that as concerns the original Bill 409, I'm glad we are pursuing a replace all with this amendment, and so that original language is removed, which I had objection to. But otherwise, I think we've done a very thorough job trying to incorporate all the issues we've heard in hearing in this very complicated bill, and so I appreciate your cooperation on it.
Well, I want to thank the committee for everybody's help, because this has been a real deep dive to get this to where it is. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any volunteers? Senator Perkins Colker, you've done a lot on this. Would you like to take this?
I will take you out.
We have
Oh,
to
yes,
pass the whole
oh,
thing.
and I did it
That was
again.
just the
All right,
amendment.
now we're gonna vote on the bill as amended. I've moved it ought to pass, and Senator Gendro has seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All, any opposed?
Mr. Chair, would you entertain a consent calendar motion?
Can't.
Oh, that's right, I keep forgetting. Okay,
We probably should, I mean, we probably
I
should
would
talk
entertain
about
one, but I would, Tammy would not be happy with this. Sorry,
You tell Tammy. No.
would you like to take this up?
it. I would be happy to take it out, Chair.
Senator
Thank
Perkins
you.
Colker. All right. 532. With a simple amendment. So, do I have a motion on 532?
On 532, I move out to pass, Chair.
Do we have a second?
I'll second. Okay.
Senator Gendro seconds. Okay? Senator Perkins Polka, I know there's an amendment here that's supposed to have your name on it too, but it just has mine. So I will move the amendment. 1891S. I move amendment 1891S. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Senator Gendro seconds. Okay, we'll go through this real quick. There's, these are the two other pieces that we had in the amendments left over from last week that we did not have, that I knew there may be some concerns in the House, and they would request a committee of conference on. So I put them into this bill. And that is the original bill for the licensure of music therapists. And then the new paragraph is the telehealth, excuse me, the physicians, it was Senator Rosenwald's amendment, I'm sorry. And I knew that the House had some concerns about the placement of the language, so I put that into this bill. This is all, again, what we heard last week. Any discussion from the committee?
So we are talking, Mr. Chair, about
About the
amendment 1891S.
Correct.
Okay.
So, I have no real substantive comments on the amendment. I know we've had a hearing on these issues to sort of flesh anything out, but I did just want to register the fact that I wish we weren't doing a replace all on 532 because the original bill concerned music therapists, which, you know, we heard in committee has been really impactful for our veterans, especially recovering from PTSD. And so that was.
So we're only amending all after section 6.
Oh, we are?
Yes, it relieves the
Oh, we're
original bill.
keeping the original bill. Thank you for pointing that out.
That's okay.
And for interrupting me before I keep going.
It's okay. I mean, Senator Carson has a deadline, so.
Putting in,
After section, this bill amends after section 6.
which
of the
is on
original bill.
page
Okay.
5,
I've got to go to
right?
the original bill, so let me
Yes.
get there.
Page
Well-
4.
Then I
Amendment.
appreciate your work on this, Chair, and I'm excited to pass this entire package.
15, Scarborough Statute.
Further discussion from the committee? Seeing none, all those in favor of Amendment 1891S, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I don't remember who moved, so now I'm looking for a move on to pass as amended, because I forget who did.
So moved.
Senator Carson moves OTPA,
Second.
and seconded by Senator Perkins Wolf. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Do you want to take out music therapists?
You haven't taken one out yet,
Senator
have I,
Altshuler?
today?
Yes,
No.
we'll give you a
What am-
second, 250,
That's right.
but we'll
Those
give
will
you
be
a
the
second.
Yeah, okay. I had just reached my quota, but all right. I'm on it. OTPA.
Because you were a co-sponsor, I think.
Yes.
Let me find my right list in this
Okey
pile of
doke.
papers, because I have set something on it. There it is.
So I think the only one we have left is 358.
Yeah.
And I think that
358.
we should, because this is not a fiscal note bill, we do not have to do this today. I think, in my opinion, we should hold at least one bill, just in case.
I don't think that's a bad idea. Does anybody have
House.
any objection to
The
that?
House is gonna be meeting and they will be attaching bills left and right, so we should keep something. We should keep something as a vehicle, just in case, just for, see? People in the audience, Senator, are going,
I'm
yup.
not gonna do that. Come on.
So, this bill is not due out until June 1st.
I think we're gonna hold that.
I think it'd be a good idea, just to hold it, just in case.
All right,
Okey-doke.
so sorry, I'm just making notes here.
Where did this
So I
come
would
from?
entertain a motion to come out of executive.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I want to thank the committee because you've done a wonderful job on this. This has been a heavy lift, and I want to certainly thank OPLC to you guys, and all of you for that matter. This has been a big job, and I think we've done a pretty good job of getting through it. So, with that,
All right.
our work is done for the day, and we are
See you in
adjourned.
June?
Don't leave, yeah, don't leave. I wanna talk to you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, everyone.
So not next week. We're done, right?
Well, we have this one bill.
I thought they were-